the standout here? Because we knew a lot of these numbers going into this. We weren't expecting any surprises, except for the fact that it looks like they're not reporting a forecast for the quarter.
Yeah, so they had reported preliminary results on May 13th, so none of this is really a surprise. It's all largely within the range. They ended up sort of on the high end of the range, so investors reacted marginally positive to that. Stepping back, you still have to think, wow, like they lost $1 billion in 3 months. That's a lot of money.
As did Lyft.
As did Lyft in last year. They lost that much money.
But they lost a lot of money.
They lost a lot of money in the quarter due to, for GAAP accounting, you have to add all sorts of IPO equity costs. And so we'll expect to see those in Uber's next quarter. So expect giant losses in the next quarter due to those charges. But on the call, yeah, they didn't offer forecasts. They didn't explain why, but they did sort of give some vague guidance on the call, which is still ongoing, to expect incentives paid out to customers to come down in the future as a percentage of revenue. They said marketing will come down in Q2, which investors liked, and that drove the stock back up in aftermarket trading.
Looking at some of the details coming out from the call, they're talking about international, targeting countries where they see a regulatory opening: Germany, Argentina, Japan, South Korea, Spain, Italy. That on top of what he mentioned, Dara Khosrowshahi mentioned about Uber being a bigger platform. And so any company that competes on one thing, Uber is going to be more competitive.
Yes, those were countries that had been closed to pretty much any of these types of Uber and their international competitors for a long time, and have only recently started to open up. Japan and Germany both have very, very strong taxi industries that have a lot of influence in the government, and so Uber was kind of locked out of those countries for a little while.
And of course, Lyft doesn't have an international business.
Right, they're just in Canada right now. But they have a bunch of international allies, and so there is that prospect that maybe somewhere down the line, though we don't think it's anytime soon, they will try to expand globally, but Uber is a much, much bigger business than Lyft.
All right, well, we did put a chart together here in the Bloomberg comparing Uber's losses to Lyft's, and this one, it looks like has the most recent numbers. Tell us what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so in the first one, we're looking at operating losses for both companies. It's a tremendous amount of money for both, really. But by any business measure, they're very loss-making businesses. Uber vastly more so because it's so much bigger and operates globally. And then the operating margins are also not good by most business standards. But Uber's looks slightly healthier. Lyft kind of has been growing faster in many U.S. markets partly because it's been spending so much on paying incentives to drivers and discounts to customers to use the service.
One of the interesting things that's different between the two companies is that Lyft on its earnings call said that this was the peak spending year. When I asked Dara Khosrowshahi about whether this was Uber's peak spending year on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, he wouldn't give me an answer. And so how is that going to sit with investors over the next few quarters, given all of the uncertainty on top of the market volatility?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, Lyft thinks that it can gain a foothold in the U.S. and then just like kind of bring the cost down and not have to spend so much to gain market share. Uber is competing in a lot more places, and so they don't know what's going to happen in India or Argentina or some of the countries you had mentioned. Although Uber did say on the call just a few minutes ago that this will be the investment year, so maybe the implication there is that next year won't be quite as expensive of an investment year, but I don't think they want to commit to anything just yet. They want to test the market and see how much investors are willing to stomach.